Hello everyone, welcome to Behind the SME. My name is Catalina and I'm part of the team in the podcast. Today, Adam and I will be talking through the autumn statement and its impacts on SMEs. Hello Adam.
Catalina, all right?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, let's get into this. What a day yesterday, huh?
I know.
Pretty wild.
Very wild. Lots of changes.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you do when there's a budget? Are you watching the budget? Are you calling your accountant straight away? Are you stressed? What's happening?
I do watch the budget. They say it's going to be an hour. It's always a bit longer. All the heckling and excitement. I think it's an exciting event, right? It affects all of us. So yeah, I do watch it. I do read the summaries afterwards, and then when they release the detailed summary, I read the bit which is specific to my industry. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it does affect all of us. So nowadays I do tend to take quite close attention to it.
Makes sense. I wouldn't recommend putting the full budget into ChatGPT. It couldn't read it very well. So
too long.
I don't know, just couldn't process it, couldn't process numbers. So
yeah,
not an easy win there. National insurance has going up from an employer's perspective. So businesses are going to pay a lot more per employee. What does that mean for your business? What is the immediate impact? And what do you think the sort of longer lasting implications are?
Yeah, so national insurance, two parts to it. Employer's contribution, employees' contribution. Employer's bit is essentially what you pay on top of the salary. So it used to be 13.8%. They've put it to a nice round number of 15%. So, in round terms, if you were paying someone £50,000, you pay now £7,500 on top. Is that right?
Quick math.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so, it's really impactful. It's basically a tax on employing people. And, for my business, our wage bill is about £5 million. So it's going to cost us 60, 70K per year. It's a lot. And that's money straight off your margin. So, the impact on small business, maybe it disincentivizes employing more people. There's a chance and a danger that employers pay the burden initially, but actually over time, the way that's felt is in potentially less pay rises, or when they hire people, they might factor it into people's starting salaries. So, there's a good argument to say that actually employees end up taking the hit on that. But yeah, it's a big one. It's a painful one for a lot of companies. And if you're in a high wage intensive industry, then you'll feel that burden straight out of the gate. And yeah, for an SME, there's obviously a lot of pressures going on. The budget generally, I think, put a lot of pressure on small businesses, and this is probably the most stark one for most business owners.
Yeah, and I mean, that combined with the national living wage going up from April, for SMEs with a large wage dependent workforce, it's quite a big payroll expense increase.
Yeah, and if you build an annual budget, which I think most companies do in some way, shape, or form, you're not factoring in such big rises. So you've got hopefully a spreadsheet with a wage line and a forecast of what that might look like, and then hopefully a margin which is spit out, hopefully a cash flow statement that links to the budget. It will be a big change for a lot of people, and you've got a load of assumptions in there, but these are fixed. They are determined by powers that be, and therefore you have to make the changes. Yeah. And it will impact a lot of companies. And I think long term, the danger is that if margins are lower, the capital available to reinvest and to grow is limited. And this is a growth-based policy or growth-based government. So it's been elected on a mandate for growth, and to then constrict SMEs, the lifeblood of the economy, in a couple of key ways, I think is painful, maybe counterintuitive. There are probably some things that small business leaders and owners can do, though, I think, and to try and counteract that. she mentioned the word productivity in terms of internal departments within government. I think it applies to all businesses as well. And it does put a focus on productivity, how to get more from the workforce, how to encourage higher performance from your team I think, should be a focus for business leaders now. I think that annually as best practice, company owners should look at their model, i.e. how they operate, how they make money, and reassess it and say, if I was starting the business today from scratch, is the model that we are about to embark on that has served us well to date, is it still appropriate for next year and the year after? And I think that's a really important question to ask regularly anyway. But when you're starting to get pressures, I think it raises its importance again. And I think finally, there's a natural tendency, I think, when your cost base goes up, to immediately want to try and transfer that cost to your customers and clients and go, right, well, the only way to protect my margin and working capital provisions is to just transfer the cost through. And I would say that is, it's a sensible way to approach it. I would say to factor into that conversation as well is to try and think about the value that you're adding to your clients. Mm-hmm. And are there any wins that you can achieve whereby it does increase value, but at a different rate to the increase in cost? So I'll give you an example from early on in my life, but it tells the story quite well, right? Yeah. So we were shopping for student houses, lots of viewings, and lots of student houses look the same, don't they? They're pretty miserable. They've clearly had a handful of students in them that don't necessarily look after them as well as they could. And we saw one house where the landlord had done things a bit differently. They put a projector on the ceiling and a sheet coming down. They had painted the walls pink and put up some funky art. And the house to its core was the same. But because they'd put a bit more of a student kind of touch to it with a couple of fairly cheap, I think, additions, they were charging an extra, I can't remember how much, but, call it £30-40 each per month. And it was an easy value add for them, but it enabled them to push the costs up. So it's a basic example, but what I'm saying is scrutinize the value that you're adding to your clients and customers. If there are easy wins, then maybe there's an opportunity to raise prices, mm-hmm. but it feel like they're getting more, your customers and clients are getting more at the same time.
Yeah. So in summary, look at productivity, high performance. Have a look at your budget every year and your model. What's that? There's a name for that budgeting technique. It's called
cost plus.
Don't know. Where you basically start from zero.
Oh, okay.
So you start from zero instead of taking last year and adding. And then the third piece is looking at value. What is your value add? And trying not to shift it all onto the consumer initially.
Yeah. Nice. Exactly.
Okay. Should we change tack to R&D?
Yeah, let's talk about R&D.
You work in the world of R&D. How are you feeling about the Labour government's stance on innovation?
I think, so the R&D tax incentive has been here for 24 years now, but it's been in existence in other developed economies for a lot longer. So we have this kind of strange scenario whereby we can almost see the future, mm-hmm. because the UK legislation has followed a very similar pattern to other jurisdictions. I think everyone in the industry saw this coming to an extent. The last 24 months there's been a lot more scrutiny and a reduction in generosity that has happened overseas. What they've done, I think, sensibly is say, we hear you, uncertainty is painful, you're not able to invest and build long-term models. So we're just going to fix it. We're just going to say that it is where it is. The RDEC rate, the large company rate historically is now more generous than it ever has been. But the SME rate, is less generous because they've merged the two schemes. They've landed in the middle. They've tried to simplify it. Personally, having been in the world for a long time, I quite like their commitment to it. What they've done in terms of the amount of scrutiny they've put into the R&D landscape in the last 24 months has been the right thing to do. Don't necessarily agree with some of the methods that they've taken, and I feel like some really good claimants have been, poorly affected from some of the interactions they've had with HMRC. But generally, it's been the right thing for them to do. So a good long-term commitment by this government to innovation and to funding innovation, we can only see as a positive, I believe. And I think what will happen is we'll continue to see the rates of claimants come down. We'll continue to see a couple of extra layers of complexity coming into the legislation, which slightly better direct where the funds are going. I actually think in the long term, we will see rates go back up. And you will find, I hope, that, there's, call it 50,000 innovative businesses that are benefiting in a direct format from the incentive available, and they're companies that really should be encouraged to do the work they're doing. And once we've got to that point and the compliance process is really well worked, actually, they might have the ability just to go, and a couple of proof points to go, now we can push this up a couple of pips, because it's doing what they want it to do. It's encouraging the right behaviors and encouraging growth. So there's a long answer to a short question, but I don't think she had any other choice to do other than doing what she did. Yeah,
I mean, we needed the stability. So
I think so. And this is the first time we've seen a corporation tax roadmap, as far as I'm aware. There's quite a lot of detail in there, and it does provide some certainty. They've been quite smart about the way they've said it. We're capping it at 25%. That they've not said there's going to be no movement at all between now and the end of Parliament. They've said, look, it's never going higher. Just like it's good. This is one of the lower rates in the G7. So, they're trying to encourage us in that way and encourage external investment. I get that, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a bit of movement at some point.
Not bad movement if it's capped at 25.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how they kind of pull the levers. Yeah.
£20 billion set aside for R&D. I think, does that also include sort of grant funding? Yeah.
Yes.
So how do businesses access that funding? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, the 20 billion figure has a very detailed breakdown that I won't go into, but let's take a pool like what ends up with Innovate UK. So a grant funding body, their job is to distribute grant funding from government through to businesses. What you'll see is that the businesses that benefit the most are those that are in the field that support the government's big ambitions for their parliament, which is mostly laid out in the industrial strategy. For example, it might be green energy.
Net zero.
Yeah, net zero, AI. There's a handful of their big objectives. If you're in one of those fields, then the likelihood of achieving and receiving government support is much, much higher. But that doesn't mean to say that if you're not in those fields, then you won't. And there are general pools of funding available. The way to access it is to make an application through one of the websites. And there's a lot of ways you can access those funds. You can do applications yourself. You can work with advisory firms. You can work with freelancers and contractors. It can be quite complex as a process and quite time consuming. So your chances of success, I'm going to say this, I run an advisory firm in this space, is a bit higher with an advisory firm. But yeah, they're designed so that you can self-apply for those pools of funds.
Okay. Shall we move on to CGT?
Yeah.
What are the changes and how is it going to impact businesses?
So capital gains tax, let's talk about in terms of SMEs.
Yeah.
If you were a business owner before the budget and you wanted to sell your business, you would only pay 10% on the first £1 million and then 20% thereafter. It used to be called entrepreneurs relief. Business asset disposal relief is what it's been renamed as. It's a catchy title, obviously. They've changed both rates. So that business asset disposal relief rate of 10% is going up to 14 and then 18%. So an extra 40,000 and then an extra 80,000 if you were to sell your business. And then the headline rates have gone up from 20 to 24%. So what does that mean? If you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you have a business that is sellable and you have a buyer, obviously you pay more tax. My view on this is that it's one of those things, right? If would you delay your decision? Maybe, but there's no guarantee that that rate's going to come down. You know, we saw a very long period of Conservative government. Are we going to see a very long period of Labour government? Potentially. You know, Conservatives have got a bit of rebuilding to do. So I think holding out on selling your business in the hope that CGT might come down, I think is potentially not the right thing to do. And I've heard this expression multiple times in the past, you know, should you let the tail wag the dog on these things? My belief, no. You know, if it's the right time, then unfortunately you just have to wear it. But yeah, it is a bit of a pain. And does it encourage entrepreneurship? Not necessarily. But you know, it is what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, you know, I think there's an element of being smart with your tax, like having a tax strategy. And then there's a part where you actually can't change your fundamental plans just for the reason of tax.
Yeah. And you shouldn't, you know, and if the timing is right to sell your business and the buyer's there and it meets your desires more broadly as a human being and whatever's going on in your life, then that extra 4% or wherever it might be, yeah, you just got to, I think, take it on the chin, unfortunately. But it's a bit disappointing. You know, there's a few bits I think that really hurt as a business owner, and a lot of our listeners will empathize with this. Corporation tax is a really annoying tax. You know, you've worked really, really hard to generate profit. And often there's a massive disconnect in terms of timing from when you create that profit through to when you have to pay the bill. And so, you know, let's take a company with a calendar financial year end, and let's say they complete a project in Q1 of 2024 that is profitable, that makes 100 grand in profit. And so, you know, on paper, 25 grand, you're up. What you don't do, you owe 25 grand in tax. What you don't do is put that in, you know, you go, I'm going to reinvest this. I'm feeling positive. So you go through the process of trying to find more projects that are, you know, going to create 100 grand profit. The tax bill, that 25 grand is due on the 1st of October, 2025. It's a long gap from Q1 24. So yeah, it does feel like there's a big disconnect between when you pay the tax bill and when you created the money. So they created the profit. So yeah, personally, it's one of the ones I find most frustrating
Jarring.
to pay. Yeah.
Compliance staff. HMRC's invested a whole bunch of money into hiring a whole bunch of new compliance staff. So it's clear that there's going to be a bigger focus on compliance. So for SMEs, in terms of increased scrutiny, you know, it's something that's coming up potentially. Your business has dealt quite a lot with HMRC in terms of defending your clients' R&D tax claims. Is it something to be afraid of?
Not if you've been doing things correctly. You know, I think we all want the best services available, public services. We all want a good NHS. We all want, you know, good policing. There's lots of good reasons to pay tax. I think the staff that are there to safeguard the rules need to be there. So I don't necessarily see 5,000 extra compliance people as the worst thing in the world, because if you are doing things the right way out of the gate, you actually have nothing to worry about. And my experience in dealing with HMRC is that if you've got the right data, you comply with their requests in a sensible, reasonable manner, in the most part, there's a rational, timely response. And when the rules are very black and white, it's a lot easier. And sometimes there's a miscalculation, sometimes there's a misunderstanding, but you can work through those. So I don't think there's any reason to be fearful of them, but it is worth knowing, if you've never been through a kind of an interaction with HMRC, that they are quite time consuming and they do need a lot of detail. And in my experience, and the advice I give everybody is that prevention is your best medicine here. And if you keep good records and you are on top of your submissions of data and the like, then actually, you're putting yourself in a good position there. But also, it's worth having really good advisors around you. A really good accountant, is worth their weight in gold. And having a good understanding of your agreement with your accountant and whether or not there is protection built into your agreement, such that if there are subsequent questions to a submission they've made, maybe it's your tax return, maybe a VAT return, something along those lines, actually, are they protecting you, and who's going to bear the cost of that? So yeah, prevention is better than cure. Prevention is the best medicine.
Mm-hmm.
You need to cure. and have a good, reliable advisor in place.
Cool, Adam. Well, thank you so much. Do you have anything else you wanted to add, just in general?
Yeah, I think I'm guilty of being an optimist. What we've seen from the broader strategy, if we zoom out, is they're hiking up some taxes in order to spend more. If you're in an environment whereby you can get nearish where government spend might be on the NHS, on education, on transport, on some of these high-tech firms, I think it's worth looking at the industrial strategy and seeing how you can maneuver yourself to better take advantage of the growth areas. And can you piggyback off some of the good stuff that they're planning on doing there? What we've seen in the past is, when governments commit to investment, and they can leverage quite large pools of money, and it does attract private investment, and it can be a real kickstarter for certain activities. And if you nearish that space, try and get involved in it. Would be my advice. So I am an optimist. I do hope that the growth rates that she identified and the OBR, forecasts are a downplay, because they are pretty meek, I think. And we do start to see, some really positive, noises from the economy. And, if that happens, SMEs just ride on the coattails as well. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully we see that growth that we're all hoping for.
Well, I'm also an optimist, so I hope so too. Thanks so much.
No problem. Enjoyed it.